Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very senior tech leader and an author from Austin, Texas, USA, Elizabeth Bieniek. Elizabeth, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I'm excited for
Thank
this
you.
conversation.
Thank you. Elizabeth is an author, speaker, and a consultant. She's an author of a book titled Cake on Tuesday, and we will be speaking about her book today. She's been named one of the 10 most influential female pioneers in technology, and she spent time with Cisco, WebEx, and others. So, Elizabeth, before we get to your book, a few questions for you. You've been called one of the most influential female pioneers in technology. What moments in your career do you think led to that recognition?
First of all, it's a very flattering uh, list, and I am very honored to be recognized as that.
Yeah.
What got me on that list, and I know what initially led to it, was my work in spatial computing, specifically around WebEx hologram in the augmented reality space. And I had the honor of leading the team that brought that from concept into the hands of customers and first customer trials.
Mhm.
And it was really exciting to do something new. At the time, we were building something that the world had never done before. Seeing end-to-end holographic systems in real time was something that had been discussed for many years, but never actually proven. So I had the joy and pleasure of starting a team that was going to see if that was technologically feasible.
Mhm.
And that was our original goal, phase one. Could this be done? And then we started getting win after win, and it was really exciting to see the momentum. And then it's always exciting when you get into the hands of customers and realize that how they want to use it is even different than how you originally imagined. And this could actually solve really pressing problems for them that you didn't even have on your radar.
Amazing, amazing. And was there a turning point that made you realize that tech needed to be more human-centric?
I think it comes from, I talk a lot about the freedom and power in admitting that you don't know everything.
Mm.
I think that applies very much to my life and my career. I actually never even set out to be in technology,
Mhm.
so it tickles me a bit to have been recognized so graciously in this space.
Mm.
But my original focus was in writing and English, and I went to business school thinking I was going to focus more on the operational side of business,
Mhm.
but falling in love with the technology side and realizing how technology really allows people to connect.
Mhm.
That is what I'm most passionate about. I think technology is most amazing when you are focused on the relational aspects of humans coming together. And can I solve that? Like right now, we're in opposite parts of the world having a face-to-face chat, and that's amazing because we're using technology. So when it facilitates that human interaction and human relationship, that's when I find it really, really powerful. And I think because I didn't come from a technology background, that relational angle was always my first focus. And realizing the more you apply that to new and emerging technologies, the more it resonates with people. You have quicker adoption and more interesting use cases.
Very well said. You know, when I was reading about you, I was also fascinated, which led me to ask you this next question. What's been your biggest failure that turned out to be a gift?
That's a good question. I would have to say it's probably related to what I was just mentioning. I think I spent the first several years in tech making
Mhm.
excuses for why I wasn't the most tech savvy person in the room. And I felt like that was a shortcoming. And it wasn't until a few years in that I realized that's a superpower. Because I am not looking at it from a tech first lens, my natural default is to look at it as a person first lens. And realizing that that's where a lot of technology fails. I think we see so many emerging tech startups and so many of them fail. And a lot of times they don't fail because of the tech. The tech is amazing. They fail because of the human element of it. They fail to have that resonate with their audience. They fail for people to get emotionally attached to why they want to use this product and how it could change their lives. And so I think that it went from being a negative I felt I needed to cover up or not acknowledge that well, and turned into that's probably my biggest strength in the technology space.
Amazing. Elizabeth, let's now talk about your book, Cake on Tuesday. Very unusual name. So my obvious question is, what's the story behind the name Cake on Tuesday? Why cake and why Tuesday?
So the subtitle of Cake on Tuesday is 25 Lessons to Unlock Corporate Innovation.
Okay.
And it was based on that multi-year project of leading the WebEx hologram team, which really turned into an entrepreneurial journey of running a stealth startup inside of a big tech organization. And I tried to distill that down into 25 short little snappy reads that could really pass on that wisdom and learning that it took me the long way to learn. One of the chapters is called Have Cake on Tuesday, and it's all about celebrating the journey and having joy in the process, because anytime you're creating something new, it's hard work, and you really need to balance having fun and levity with that hard work, or the team is just going to get burnt out.
Yeah.
And so Have Cake on Tuesday was all about a particular phase in the project where we were past our first initial, oh wow, can we do this? Those milestones, yet we weren't to customer readiness. We were in the middle and we were doing a lot of process improvements and experience improvements. And it was just not that exciting. We didn't have a milestone to rally around. So I was talking with my operations manager and we were talking about how do we make this more fun? And she had the idea of making a Wheel of Fortune style Wheel of Winning, she called it. She put everybody's name on the team and it made this physical shiny wheel. And at the end of our staff meetings, which were on Tuesdays, she would spin the wheel. And if it landed on your name, we would send you a cake wherever you were in the world at the time. We're a global team spread across 9 time zones, 4 different countries. And a cake would arrive at your door later that week. So it was a way to just have some fun and
Yeah,
just celebrate the fact that we're doing something cool.
absolutely. And what a powerful message, to get a cake uh, on a Tuesday or
Everybody likes
during the
cake.
week, and fascinating. So, you also talk about being disagreeable in a productive way. My question is, how can leaders use disagreement to drive innovation without causing chaos?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think a lot of times we look at disagreement with a negative connotation. And especially when you're in a larger organization or a hierarchical organization, it could be associated, well, I can't disagree with the boss because that's looked at as being disrespectful. And I think disagreement gets a bad rap. Disagreement doesn't mean being negative or contrary for contrary's sake or being disrespectful. You can be disagreeable in a very respectful way. But I look at it as if I'm part of an organization, my job as an individual is to help make the broader organization better as a whole. So what can I bring to the table to do that? And if that is my different perspective because I've come from a different background, I have a unique take on certain things, I need to bring that to the forefront. If I'm talking to a room full of people who are maybe all from a similar background, they might not see a certain obstacle or issue that is very apparent to me because I came from a different perspective. It is my responsibility to bring that up, even if it is a disagreeable
Yeah,
opinion in that room.
yeah.
There may be a valid reason why we don't want to address that or tailor to that, but it needs to be brought up. And I think overall, when we bring up those dissenting opinions, we're helping making the overall product and team better.
Great response. And Elizabeth, why is simplicity such a powerful tool for leaders and innovators?
I think because simplicity is the biggest first step to whether or not you're going to be successful or fail. The idea of innovation, I talk a lot about if you want to be innovative, if you want to do something new, you're actually in sales. You are usually always selling something, whether it's a new idea, a new concept, a new why, or you're trying to convince people in a team of why do you want to join this new risky venture, or you're trying to sell to leadership of why do you want to invest in this, why do you want to be a part of this. You're constantly selling it, and you have to be able to position that in an incredibly simplistic way that somebody can get on board with a new concept in a new area with so many unknowns, but they need to very quickly catch on to the vision. And simplicity is going to be your best tool in that format because you want to very easily convey the excitement of the why behind it. And a lot of times we get bogged down with, well, here's the spec sheet and here's the details and here's all the customer demographics and it's too much and people
Hmm.
lose, well, what is the why? What is that one exciting piece behind of like, why do I want to be a part of that vision? And if you start with that, you'll have time later to get into the details. But if you don't go simple in the beginning, there usually won't be a chance to go deeper later.
Absolutely, well said. And another term which was fascinating was going outside. What does going outside mean to you? And how can leaders encourage that mindset in their teams?
I used an anecdote in the book of I grew up in rural upstate New York, and my mom used to always tell me to go outside. Anytime you're bored, go outside. You don't feel good, go outside. And I think that really formed my perspective of anytime I needed to change, something needed to change, I like to physically change my surroundings. And sometimes that is as simple as just getting up from your desk, walking outside your four walls, and going for a walk around the neighborhood, through a park, down the street. Sometimes that simple shift physically will unlock a lot mentally. So I like to use that as a metaphor for getting unstuck. And I think when you apply that to business, a lot of times when corporations are stuck in something bigger, like a strategy or approach or how they're going to have a go-to-market strategy, a lot of times the reason they're stuck is because they're inside trying to figure it out within the confines of what they already know and have already done.
Yeah.
And when you go outside and talk to other people in the industry and talk to your customers and even talk to your competitors, that really opens up a lot more avenues for creativity.
Well said. And what are some of the most common self-imposed obstacles leaders face when trying to execute bold ideas?
Fear is definitely one of them. I think the fear of failure, a lot of times we talk ourselves out of something before we even give it a fair shake, a fair try. I think too, thinking a lot of times leaders will look at, I can't invest in this effort for the future because I need to hit these current quarter milestones. And they think the two are contrary.
Hmm.
But in reality, if you look at the complements between the two, a lot of times when you're talking to your customers, if you're selling them on here's what we have today, here's the benefits of that, here's where we're going, here's this journey and why we want to partner for the long term, that can actually help your short term. So I think just getting outside of the mindset of current current churn and looking at that longer term and saying, how do these complement, not contradict?
Well said. Your book also talks about decisive culture. I'd love to get your perspective on what does a decisive culture look like in action?
Yeah, I titled that chapter "Don't Be a Flat Squirrel." And I live in Austin, Texas, where we are overrun with squirrels. They are everywhere.
Mm.
And you see them all the time run out in front of your car and then stop and then try to make a decision. Do I go forward? Do I go back? And
Okay.
therefore, you see a lot of flat squirrels,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Mm.
I think that applies very much to business, and it's a good visual metaphor of oftentimes we can hem and haw about a decision and say, is this the right decision? Should I do this or not? But we forget the fact that inaction is a choice. So
Mm.
not making a decision is actually a decision. And a
Right.
lot of times if you make a choice, even if it's the wrong one, you're still making forward progress. It might not be in the exact direction you want to go, but you can course correct later. A lot of times making a decisive action is much better than waffling on indecision. And when you see that represented in a culture inside an organization, you see things happen a lot quicker because there are quick course corrects rather than seeing this, let's wait, make the best possible decision. And then things happen around you. The
Yeah.
market changes, the mood changes, the industry changes.
Well said. And Elizabeth, what are some communication traps leaders often fall into during periods of rapid innovation?
Not communicating is usually the biggest trap. It can be pressure when
I used
things
to
are
think of
going
this
really.
on a need to know basis.
Yeah. And that usually doesn't work out very well. A lot of times when we're going really fast, there's a lot of happening. It can be really tempting to just skip those updates and I don't have time for this. Let's just gloss over. People know what's going on. But that's when the wheels fall off.
Yeah.
And it's really, really important when things are busy, when things are crazy, communication is much more important in those seasons than when things are slow and calm and steady. I think that's the biggest one. And a close follow up to that, I would say, is making the mistake of communicating to people in the style that you like rather than the style that they best receive. I talk about this in Cake on Tuesday, and I tried to be very mindful of doing this with my team of certain individuals, they might receive a message if we have a quick chat versus other people are great with just send me an email and I'll look at it later so I have something to document to refer back to. Or maybe it's all of the above and we say it in a meeting and we repeat it in a follow-up and we have a documented source that you can go refer back to if necessary. Making sure that the communication is not just in the style that works for you, but the style that works best for your team.
Fascinating. You also use the term, which is the barren middle. So I wanted to ask you, the barren middle sounds like a dark place. How do you keep going when progress stalls?
Yes, it can be a dark place. That is the fourth of five sections in my book of leading through the barren middle. What I meant by the barren middle is that part where it's kind of where Have Cake on Tuesday came from, where things can lose the excitement of the beginning and not have the satisfaction of the conclusion. A lot of times persistence is the biggest thing that you need. I know there's a lot of great quotes about, just sticking with things a little bit longer than everyone else. I think that's a season where, as a leader specifically, you need to be stubbornly and optimistically persistent. And that is what will help your team get through it. And in order to do that, you have to be mindful of your own energy and your own joy and protecting that. So I talk about sometimes having to be your own cheerleader, about having a strong mentor cabinet, but being mindful of who you're listening to, because not all advice is good advice. And there are times where, especially if you're trying to go somewhere where no one's ever gone before, they can't advise you on that journey.
Mhm.
So there's a lot I focus in on there of getting a little bit introspective and looking at your own leadership approach and making sure that you are protecting yourself such that you can continue to lead your team through those dry spells.
Fascinating. What is your approach to protecting team culture during challenging phases of a project?
I think making sure it's in the forefront.
Mm,
Culture is a lot of times an afterthought, unfortunately, for a
mm,
lot of organizations. And again, same as communication, when things get busy, it can fall to the wayside and like, oh, we've got a good culture, it's going to stay there. But I think we can fall into the illusion that culture is a one and done. Like I
yeah.
set up a good culture for my team, and so therefore it's just going to go on into perpetuity forever like that. And it's not. Culture is very fluid and culture is very fragile. So I think keeping it at the forefront and realizing, is what I'm doing right now helping to strengthen that culture, or is it working against that? And you always have to keep that in the front of your mind through every phase that you're going through, because anytime culture falls to the back burner, that's when it starts to fall apart.
Wow. You also write about the long game, Elizabeth. How do you keep that perspective when the pressure is to deliver short-term wins?
Yeah, finding balance, I think, is unique for everyone. For me
Mm,
personally, I've always felt it incredibly important to book time on my calendar to
mm,
think.
mm,
I'll either put some random title on my calendar block of thinking, planning, going outside,
mm,
and having those, making that sacred on my calendar. And certain times when phases are really busy and things are going, that might get shorter, but it never goes away entirely. It never falls off my calendar. Personally, I like to do those on Monday mornings because it's a great way to start and head into the week.
yeah.
But I use that time, I usually turn off all of my tech. It's the time I'll either go outside, go for a walk, or I might just get a pen and paper, the old-fashioned notebook style. And I like to start thinking about those big picture things. I don't allow myself to think about everything I have to do this week and what are my current, to-dos for right now.
Yeah.
It's more a matter of, okay, am I on the trajectory of where I want to be 5 years from now? Is this project? Is this team? Are we going in the right direction? So before I get into the details to start optimizing how we get there with speed and scale, let's make sure we're going in the right direction first.
Great response. I have time for two more questions for you. My next question is, you emphasize the value of rejection. Can you share a time when you turned a rejection into a breakthrough?
The first story that comes to mind is actually pre-career in
Mhm.
college because I use this example in the book. Excuse me. I was taking an independent study course in college, and it was something I had to write a proposal for and submit it. And I needed a professor to back me up, and I had a whole committee that I had needed to submit it to. The sorry, the chair of that committee was probably the biggest naysayer to my
Mm.
project, and I knew that going into it, but I did my best. What the project was is not particularly important. I presented to the panel, and he flat out told me this will never get approved.
Yeah,
And I remember walking out of that partially feeling deflated and defeated because here's somebody who's an expert in his field, probably twice my age, and just telling me this will never. It was very definitive wording. But part of me too had that sort of defiant response of, oh yeah, I'm going to prove you wrong.
absolutely.
And I ended up reworking the proposal, worked with my professor, went back in, and I ended up getting it approved. To this day, I have no idea if he was the single naysayer still. He might have still thought it was a terrible idea, but it doesn't matter. The important lesson for me in that is sometimes you have to really get that pushback and that brick wall and that no to let you know how much you really want something. And sometimes that challenge is what you need to spur you on to making your offer better.
Absolutely. And my last question for you, Elizabeth. You write about the joy of problem solving. How do you keep that joy alive when problems never seem to end?
Well, problems never end, but you can work on one problem at a time.
I agree. Yes.
I really love puzzles. I love the way that things fit together. And I think if you think of the problems you're encountering at work or in your business
Mm.
as one of those puzzles that doesn't have edges to it,
Mhm.
it just kind of has its own unique form and could perhaps keep going. It it could get deflating, I suppose, if you look at it in the broader picture of I'm never going to solve all these problems. But that's fixing everything is not the joy. That is not the end goal. It's the
Correct.
satisfaction of making little connections along the way and realizing, oh, this connects to here. And you know what? If I move this over there, then this whole other piece can change. To me, that is fascinating and really exciting. And I find joy in just making those connections along the way.
Amazing. And on that note, Elizabeth, I just want to say thank you so much for this absolutely incredible conversation. I just love the way you so casually said you wanted to do English and you ended up being in the top 10 most influential female pioneers in technology. Thank you for talking to me with your book, Cake on Tuesday. We covered some very fascinating ground. Um, how can we be less disagreeable going outside? We spoke about decisive culture. We spoke about the barren middle, about the long game, about the value of rejection, and the joy of problem solving. Thank you for speaking to me and good luck to you.
Thank you so much. It was a really fun conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.